He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Te hewa mauri ora ki te taiao, ki te whaiao, ki te o maramaki au, we si hewa mauri ora ko Māpuna tēnei, e mihi atu nei. Kia ora, and welcome back to the podcast for Māpuna for this week. We have two guests this week, both at the same time, where we speak with Chief Kirk Francis from the Penobscot Indian Nation in Maine, northeastern United States, and the Chief Executive of Te Runanga o Toa rangatira, Helmut Modlik. Now, you may remember Helmut because, of course, he was the one who had the public debate on treaty principles with the ACT leader David Seymour. Now, that happened a few weeks ago. And, of course, you may have also heard about the Huiamotu that was held at Tuahiwi Marae, hosted by Ngāti Toa in Christchurch, North Canterbury, last week. Well, this week there was the first ever Indigenous Tribal Leaders Symposium held in Te Whanganui-a-Tara. So we thought we'd sit down and talk with Helmut and Chief Kirk Francis to discuss issues like sovereignty, constitutional arrangements and economic growth. Now, Māori could potentially learn a lot from Chief Kirk Francis and his people, the Penobscot Indian Nation. Why? Because 40 years ago, a legislation was passed called the Indian Self-Determination Act, which effectively recognised sovereignty for the Penobscot Nation in the state of Maine, recognising them as a sovereign nation, a sovereign with a mana-to-mana relationship with the sovereign that is the United States of America. Now, what does that mean? And in particular, when we talk with Helmut Modlik, can that be achieved here in New Zealand? How will that be achieved? And are we talking about things like a separate Māori parliament or a change in our own parliament here in New Zealand with a bicameral legislature? And what have been the benefits of self-determination, self-governance and sovereignty for the Penobscot Indian Nation for things like outcomes in education, health, employment and economic development? These are the issues that you'll hear in the podcast this week with Helmut Modlik and Chief Kirk Francis. This is the Māpuna podcast. Te hewa mauri ora, kia tātou katoa. Whakarongo mai. E aku rangatira tēnā korua, Helmut no mai. Chief Kirk Francis, welcome. It's great to be able to talk to you both.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
If I can start with you, Helmut, and then Chief Kirk Francis, I will come to you. Helmut, how did this symposium come together?
Well, last year, our runanga Ngāti Toa, we sent a team of senior leaders up to North America to visit with Indigenous communities in Alaska, Canada, and the United States to on a fact-finding and information-sharing mission, as it were. In particular, we were keen to understand how some of the Indigenous communities in those jurisdictions had been dealing with some of the more intractable problems and challenges in their community. I caught the tail end of that trip in Oklahoma and visited with some of the three of the nations there. And frankly, I was blown away by what I saw. The relationships that we initiated, some of the insights we took away were truly inspiring. So then we move forward into the election and the reversal of so many policies that are relevant to our people by the coalition government so early in their time, and the emergence of the kotahitanga movement over the course of the year following the karanga from Kingi to Heitia. So as a consequence of both of those developing situations, some colleagues, Mara Andrews, who is the key link with North America for us, and some friends, Nigel Chi and Danielle, also from Rangitane, we put our heads together and thought, look, it's an opportune time for us to get our friends from North America down here to talk to us about their self-determination journey. How have they managed to exert their rangatiratanga, their sovereignty, and in particular, how have they managed to pull off the uniting of the tribes in their country when they have far more than us? And so that was really the genesis, and thankfully they responded, including Chief Kirk Francis responded positively to our overtures.
And if I can just ask one more of you, Helmut, before I bring in Chief Kirk Francis here. You've given us, I think, a bit of an overview of the symposium itself. What have you learned so far?
I've learned that a lot of our thinking is right on point. I've learned that, in fact, the need for us to agree how to establish new institutional arrangements to give effect to our kotahitanga, to our unity, has transformative potential. I've learned that, or had reinforced that, once we have accomplished that in the near future, we will be able to have peer-to-peer, mana-to-mana conversations with the kāwanatanga again, and resume the journey of truth and reconciliation we've been on for decades, but which was unilaterally reversed in the last year. And I've had reinforced, or we've had reinforced, what is possible when that mana-ki-mana relationship is respectful and mutually beneficial. And the examples that have been shared from our North American friends about what they have been able to accomplish when that degree of unity is in place has doubled down on our determination, and mine personally, to see that realised here in Aotearoa.
Thank you, Helmut, and I will pick up on some of those issues, if you don't mind, later on. Chief Kirk Francis, if I can bring you in here. Can you tell us a bit about your own people, the Penobscot tribe?
Sure. And first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. So as you mentioned, we're from the northeastern part of the United States. We're a treaty tribe. We're currently on about 250,000 acres of self-governing land in the state of Maine. We're in the Penobscot River. We're a riverine people. We're on about 220 islands, covering about 65 miles, and we have about a little under 3,000 tribal citizens. And we currently operate around 110 different programs, including law enforcement, our own judicial system, our legislative branch. We have housing, social services, healthcare, education, natural resource department, all of those things you would see in any sovereign government. So we've been really blessed over the last 45, 50 years under the Self-Determination Act to really grow our tribal nation in a way that we see fit, that brings our cultural values in tow, and also focuses on, the disparities that exist within our communities that, quite frankly, no other government really considers as their cookie-cutter policy for all people. So that's a little bit about us, and yeah.
How were your people able to resolve and indeed settle the self-determination legislation, the similar treaty legislation that your people achieved those 40 years ago?
So what happened was, in the late 60s, in the state of Maine, the Penobscot people weren't even allowed to vote at that point. And then the civil rights movement really took off. And ironically, President Nixon at the time in 74, 75 really said, the federal government is failing in its responsibilities to Native people in this country, and hence the creation of the Indian Self-Determination Education Act, which was not all out of the goodness of the heart of the president. It was really about the formation of the National Congress of American Indians, really bringing the American Indian movement was going on at that time, and a whole host of things that were really bringing light to the problems within the United States amongst the tribes. So there was this force. Sometimes it was very visible protests, taking over buildings in Washington, D.C., and a whole host of things that really led to Congress and others really saying, we got to take a look at this. So that activism and that period of time that was going on in the South, actually too, in the United States, with the African American community and a whole host of other things, really led to this act. And like I say, at that point in time, our tribe had been wards of the state of Maine for over a century, and really were living in deplorable conditions. And so once the courts got involved, said, the entire state was taking illegally from the Penobscot people, the negotiations started to really come into play then about, who we were, how much land we would encompass, and what that jurisdictional arrangement would be.
I have to say to you, the preamble to the settlement of the legislation in terms of the activism that took place, very similar, Helmut? I don't know if I could hear you kind of chuckling, but very similar shared history, if I can put it that way. And do you mind, Chief Francis, if I just ask you about the powers that you have? You talked about the jurisdictional authority that you have. What exactly does that mean? For example, I'm referring to you as Chief Francis, your own role. What does that mean that you can do and that your people can do with that jurisdictional authority?
So my role as the elected chief and CEO of our tribe is on a day-to-day basis. There's no higher authority when it comes to tribal land. We don't get interference from outside law enforcement, for example. We don't get any outside interference on our natural resources, our ability to hunt, fish, all of those things. But what it really started to lay out was the fact that the tribe really now was taking on the role of the federal government and entering into what's called 638 contracts, which is basically says the government has this responsibility to tribes. You're going to now serve in that role in a self-determined way and decide how you want these resources to be applied. And so for us, we're totally self-governing. We have, some issues with the jurisdictional arrangement because the Settlement Act was really, kind of negotiated in a desperate situation for our tribe. We had a conservative government coming into place under President Ronald Reagan that threatened to terminate us if we didn't settle this act, because we had the whole state locked up in terms of title and all of those things. And so it's not perfect, but at the end of the day, we were able to develop our own courts. We now prosecute crimes within our community, within our courts, whether they're Indian or non-Indian in certain instances, up into a certain level of crime. So we have Class C felony jurisdiction over drug-related crimes, violence against women, for example, and other things. But when it comes to things like murder, rape, the Major Crimes Act kicks in, and then the federal government has jurisdiction in those areas.
And just so I'm clear, Chief Francis, does your jurisdictional authority also enable you or empower you with the ability to undertake negotiations with federal government, or indeed on your own, with things like tax ratings, so the accumulation of economic power to be able to serve and look after your people?
Exactly. So we have a nation-to-nation relationship with the United States, a trust fiduciary relationship. And so we negotiate amongst other tribes as well for tax regimes that are favorable. Our Constitution mentions us as sovereign. Also, under the tax laws of the United States, going back to the 1800s, it talks about Indians not taxed. Now, that hasn't been our reality, but recently, how we form our corporations and business development is exempt from federal taxation. And in the state of Maine, we're able to legislate based on those rules, a tax regime where tribal members or tribal citizens working for tribal government or on tribal land, living on tribal land, are income tax exempt as well. So yeah, we've been able to parlay a lot of that sovereign authority into ways that really benefit people living in disadvantaged areas and in disadvantaged communities dealing with huge disparities.
Chief Francis, thank you for that illumination. This is Māpuna on RNZ National. You're listening to Te Runanga o Toa Rangatira Chief Executive Helmut Modlik, and also Chief Kirk Francis from the Penobscot Indian Nation in Maine in the northeastern United States. Okay, Helmut, there's the plan. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, doesn't it? Doesn't it? So look, when I said that I turned up to Oklahoma, and we were first greeted by the chief of the Choctaw people there, and we were met not only with the chief, and so we're familiar with that title and expected to see some elders come out and some of their kaumatu and so on, but we found ourselves ushered into a hall, a room, a large formal area that looked, well, very formal. And we were introduced to the Secretary of Health and the Secretary of this and the other thing. And we thought, oh, this is rather curious. Why have they got those titles? And what we soon discovered was, in fact, as Chief Francis has just described, the sovereign Indian nations actually operate their own executive, their own legislature, their own judiciary. They have their own police force. They are literally sovereign nations. And it's hard to overstate what an eye-opener that was for us, and the parallel with our desire to exert our mana motuhake, our rangatiratanga in our tribal boundaries and our rohe, of course, came to mind. And that's part of the reason why we invited our friends from North America down, is to share their journey and some of its practicalities, some of the road bumps along the way, so that we might, in fact, not reinvent wheels, and that we might actually hasten the achievement of our own desire for self-determination.
Helmut, do you mind if I'm completely honest with you here? You said road bumps. The biggest issue I hear, and I don't call it a road bump, I'm calling it a roadblock, is the issue to deal with sovereignty here. Now, yes. and that's the issue, right? So how do we deal with that particular issue here? Because this is the only separation point that I can see between our Indigenous brothers and sisters' experience in the Penobscot Nation in Maine and with us here, is the unwillingness, or indeed just the complete denial of the issue of sovereignty.
Yeah, look, the answer is brutally simple. The answer is tell the truth. Tell the truth, and don't stop until the truth prevails. Look, the truth is, and I won't recite again the range of evidence that I presented in my debate with David Seymour, but the truth of the matter is, Julian, is that our rangatira did not cede their mana motuhake or their sovereignty. That didn't happen. That's a fiction. And so what we have to do now that the friendly journey, mutually friendly journey of partnered figuring out in the contemporary setting of what coexistence of the rangatiratanga and the kawana might mean, now that that's been callously reversed, with mean spirit, might I add, all right, well, let's go back to first principles and revisit the truth of the matter and hold the line on that. Yep, tika pono, truth, justice, rangi Māori. And the truth of the matter is, Dylan, is that we will prevail because, simply put, we're right. We are telling the truth. And so if we are patient and persistent with that, history tells us, and Chief Francis Nation's journey tells us, that arc of history bends towards justice, and the day is nearly here in this land for that truth to emerge and for us to then figure out what does that mean.
Okay, so what you're doing, and the reason why the symposium is happening, is to make sure that you're prepared for the peace whilst also trying to settle the war. Is that what you're doing? So that we get to the point at which the sovereignty issue is settled, and it sounds like you're very much, not backward and coming forward about what you want to happen in that space, but also making sure that the ground is ready to go when that eventually happens, so you, Toa Rangatira, is not caught napping when it happens.
Yeah, so you're broadly right. I'd say it slightly differently. So the war was lost in the 1860s. We're wanting to win the peace, and the peace will be won because of that pono tika rangi Māori frame. So all we're saying to our kawanatanga friends is, come back to the table. They walked away, Julian. Come back to the table, and let's just have an honest kōrero about what does coexistence of rangatiratanga and kawanatanga mean in this land in 2024. Now that has to be the conversation, because Te Tiriti o Waitangi was between the rangatiratanga and the kawanatanga.
Okay.
A unilateral alternative, which is what David and ACT are trying to impose on us, is unprincipled, unethical, and just can't happen and won't happen. So that's the invitation to our kawanatanga. Come back to the table and let us discuss in the 21st century what it looks like to coexist. Now we're getting signals from Chief Francis and the Indian nations about variants of that. It won't look like that here for a range of reasons, but there is a lot to recommend that for us to consider. Coming back to the other part of concurrent mahi that we're undertaking, yes, for decades now, Ngāti Toa and other iwi have been in good faith working with the kawanatanga to stand up and deliver the breadth of social enterprises, social services, commercial enterprises with Crown and other private partners to create a economic base, to create an operating reality that means that we can exert our rangatiratanga, we can take care of ourselves, and as is always our way with our people, as you know, to take care of our manuhiri who live in our tribal boundaries. So we're doing both of those things in parallel, and we're highly optimistic that in the not too far distant future, we'll be able to see a transformative shift in what's possible and happening in this land.
Are we in danger, though, Helmut, of not having the people who need to hear the benefits of what our brothers and sisters in Maine are doing, of not being able to hear this directly? Because if they did, that might be a way to also smooth the pathway forward here. So in other words, are we just preaching to the converted, or is the opportunity being made available?
That's actually a very insightful question, and the answer to it is undoubtedly yes. And so two observations quickly. One is that we're hopeful that we can actually, have a second verse and possibly a third and so on, until we actually can surface for many more than we're privileged to hear today, the inspirational reality that is out there and may be here. So yes, we have to keep doing that, but I think we won't be waiting. So within a month, I don't know whether your listeners know, but within a month, there will be descending on Pōneke, on Wellington, at this stage, hard to predict, but a very large number of Māori people and non-Māori people who will be coming to register their rejection and the illegitimacy of the Treaty Principles Bill. I'm here to tell you that when that happens, the energy that will be created for change will be considerable. We've heard all year, you've been at most, if not all of those hui motu, all year, the determination for us to act in unity, to resist this unilateral reversal. I personally haven't bumped into a single Māori person who is willing to accept what this coalition has imposed on us. So I think the unity is here. I think the inspiring additional insights that our friends from North America provide are additional and helpful, but I'm optimistic that we already have enough clarity here to crack on and keep moving.
Chief Kirk Francis, apologies, it may have appeared that Helmut and I were indulging ourselves, but given the political climate, I hope you can understand why I was quite keen to jump into not the minutiae, but some of the strategic alignment required to be able to achieve some of the things that Helmut and others in our EB leaders space are looking at doing. So apologies from me for that. Can I come back to you now, though, and talk about the benefits of the model of self-governance and sovereignty that you have? By the way, just so I can get this clear, do you see yourself as a sovereign nation within a sovereign nation, or a sovereign nation living with a sovereign nation?
So the courts have defined us as domestic sovereigns. So I think how we view ourselves is sovereign nations with a nation-to-nation relationship, but also citizens of the United States. So we respect the fact that we are where we are. We are in a coexistent society. I think all we've ever asked is to respect the unique and distinct cultures that live within the United States, that predate the United States, that are sovereign by fact, and that sovereignty comes from our Creator. So we So we work in a way that we govern ourselves, because in the United States as well, there are three sovereigns that are recognized in the Constitution. So the idea that countries can't have sovereigns within a country is not the model we have. I mean, states are sovereign, so there's a lot of state rights and sovereignty within states, as well as the federal government and tribal nations. So yeah, we consider ourselves part of that three sovereign system at this point. We kind of all try to stay in our own boat.
The reason I ask, Chief Francis, is if the opportunity for trade negotiations, for example, to occur between Indigenous nations arose or may have already arisen, are you able to, given your sovereign status, undertake trade negotiations with those Indigenous nations?
We are, and
Okay.
and we've done that. We've done that in Cuba. We've done that in oil deals for home heating fuel with the country of Venezuela. We've entered into those agreements ourselves. Yes.
If you don't mind, I did want to ask about how you've been able to harness the self-governance and sovereignty aspects for your people to improve lives, economically, educationally, health, and those kinds of things. In the last 40 years, what has changed fundamentally in those areas as a result of your status as a sovereign nation?
Well, I would tell you in the 1970s, before self-determination, the average income on the reservation was not even at the poverty level. We've been able to, under self-determination, focus on a multitude of areas. One, the land we own is inalienable. We can't sell land to non-tribal citizens. We can't do any of that stuff. So what we've been able to do is create guarantee programs to allow tribal people within our territories to develop wealth like the rest of America through home ownership, through a whole host of things. So we've also been able to create a tax regime that allows for tribal businesses to not get dual taxation, for example, to be able to contribute more to their community rather than the outside community, but also while providing a benefit to both. So it's been the ability to really promulgate your own rules, promulgate your own laws, to be able to focus on creating an environment in some geographically challenging locations, to be able to improve economics, to be able to get at health disparities by inflicting more resources in a more targeted way towards diabetes programs, towards nutrition programs, towards getting back to traditional diets, all of those types of things that have really helped our healthcare system. So there's, as well as educational outcomes, where we're at an all-time high right now. Kids that go to tribal schools, learning within their culture, inevitably the science, the studies, everything shows do much, much better when they leave those schools.
And so for example, I've heard of other First Nations peoples, not just in America, but also in places like Canada and British Columbia, people who I think were part of a national meeting, national Māori gathering that occurred in the South Island that Helmut was at, where representatives of British Columbian First Nations groupings and people talked about building an Indigenous economy. And they talk about things like tribal economies and bungee economics and things like that. For your people and for you, Chief Francis, what is it a quadruple bottom line? How do you approach the economic development aspect that says very clearly for you and your people, we are being successful?
So we have a diversified portfolio economically. So we focus on our forestry operations, for example. We do sustained yield foresting. We don't do any clear cutting, anything like that, but we participate in that industry for our own wildlife management and habitat. And we also, which is a lucrative program for us, we also have a federal corporation that we've separated from the politics of the tribe that focuses on federal contracting, dealing with federal set-asides in the United States government system, Department of Defense, making parts for them, other things that are sole source to tribes under that program. So we do that, and we also have, we do some online gambling that we do that's exclusive to the tribes in Maine. So we have some of those opportunities, but what we do is create a community and economic development strategy that brings the whole community together, saying these are the 5 areas we want to focus in, whether it's aquaculture, cultural tourism, forestry, whatever it is. And then we get agreement on these are the areas we're going to pursue because our cultural stories tell us that these areas are okay as long as X, Y, and Z doesn't exist. And so it's kind of a communal process, but yeah, and every year we have a State of the Tribes address that'll happen in December this year. Our entire community comes together, and once a year, our people get to vote on the laws that we will promulgate in the upcoming year. We don't arbitrarily have the power to do that without them. So,
Okay.
So that's how that works.
And are we talking about a separate parliament, legislative body here?
Yeah.
We are.
So
okay.
we have
Okay. You're listening to Māpuna on RNZ National. We are speaking with Helmut Modlik, the CEO of Te Runanga o Toa Rangatira, the Chief Executive of Te Runanga o Toa Rangatira, and Chief Kirk Francis from the Penobscot Indian Nation in Maine in the northeastern United States. Chief Francis, I will come back to you because there's some geopolitical issues that I want to talk about and try and catch a feeling about how you think things are going at the moment and what that might mean for you and your people. But if I can come back to you, Helmut, is this what we want? Do we want a separate legislative body, a separate parliament? Is that what we need as well, do you think?
Well, look, a couple of observations. The first and most important one is that once we've faced up to the constitutional situation that we actually are in, and the kawanatanga comes back to the table to talk with the rangatiratanga leadership, that's the first and most important thing. And between us, we can agree, explore what are coexistent options for us. But in the spirit of suggesting, I'd make a proposal as an example of what could be put on the table. So we operate a democracy which has among the fewest, if not the fewest, checks and balances on legislative and executive power in the Western world. It's a unicameral system. There's only one house. We used to have a bicameral and upper chamber. One option, for example, that could give effect to the coexistence of our sovereignty in this land could be the establishment of an upper chamber where representatives from the rangatira side sat with representatives from the Krauna side, the Kawana side, and fulfilled a role that a upper chamber fills in terms of evaluation and further scrutiny of legislation that might come out of the House of Representatives, and also to just offer a forum for considered discussion amongst the leadership from the Kawanatanga and Rangatiratanga side about issues of the day. Now that would be a relational sphere for our respective sovereign leadership to come together without doing violence to the underlying design and structure of our liberal democracy. We used to have an upper chamber, as I said. Now that is just an idea. We have, last thing I would say, we have any number of problems that are in our society. Probably top of the list is the enormous social and physical infrastructure deficit that I would argue has arisen out of not poor decision makers per se or ideological preferences per se. I would say it's arisen out of the limitations and flaws actually in our governmental system. And so I would suggest that this is an opportunity for Aotearoa New Zealand to strengthen its democracy, to introduce ideas of participation, deliberation, as well as the resolution of our constitutional issues that I've referred to, why not kill all those birds with one stone and place ourselves in a better democratic position than we currently are in? That's the possibility if we have the wisdom and clear eyes to engage in this conversation that we're pursuing.
Okay, and hopefully you have reinforced, Helmut, to Chief Francis, that we do have a reciprocal relationship approach. And so therefore you have not only learnt a heck of a lot, it seems, from the relationship thus far, but also have provided an opportunity, perhaps, for some shared learning with our Indigenous brothers and sisters of the Penobscot Nation in Maine in America. What can they learn from us? Because it seems to me like they are learning a lot. We are learning a lot from them at the moment. So what's the opportunity for reciprocity that might have presented itself, Helmut?
Oh, well, I think you might want to put that question to Chief Francis. I think he's been asked a couple of times today. I think he's ready to answer that one, Julian.
He is? Okay, all right. Well, then apologies then, Chief Francis. I should have come to you first. But what can you learn from us? Seriously.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the similarities of the things we face is astounding, actually, and quite eye-opening since I've been here. And I've only been in this great land for a few days. But I will tell you that what I have noticed in my time here is how culturally grounded and how much the people here, the Maori, care about this country, care about this space, how they understand who they are, and how they actually are not exactly the enemies of anyone. They're actually quite content coexisting. They want, I think, in my mind, and this is my opinion, a seat at the table. They want to be able to have a say as the first peoples of this land, and that is only acceptable. You know, you can't have a situation of arbitrarily changing treaties. You can't have a situation where you continuously talk about race-based privileges when it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the political distinction of the by fact situation that they were here first, they predate this government, and they need to be dealt with in a way that is not the rank and file process. So for me, what I've learned since I've been here is the tremendous resiliency. I mean, the fact that they have non-Maori people coming to them, speaking their language out of respect, is astonishing and, quite frankly, inspiring. And so their cultural grounding has never been destroyed. They're here. They're always going to be here. They're the ultimate New Zealander. And at the end of the day, that should be propped up as the face of this country. And it should be done so in a way that allows them their autonomy and decision-making. And it has nothing to do with any special privilege. It has nothing to do with fairness. If we want to talk fairness, I'm sure that Helmut could spend a couple of days talking about what's been fair and what hasn't been. And I'm not representing to speak for anyone here.
Don't worry, he's made it very clear to us what he thinks.
So it's it's been a learning experience for me as well, and I'm quite impressed with just the overall hospitality and attitude and just cultural belief and optimism that people have here, and I'm just really grateful that I've got to experience it.
So
Julian, if I could just
sure,
Julian, sorry, if I could just throw one thing in there.
Yep.
Chief Francis did mention, and when I was in Oklahoma, I also heard that the journey of colonization that's occurred in the United States has been going on much longer than here, and the loss of language has been heartbreaking to see, and the relative invisibility of the mātauranga, the wisdom, the knowledge, the imagery, and of course all the other cultural artifacts is heartbreaking. And so to see it reappearing, to hear the language being revitalized. Yes, that's one thing we definitely can help our whānau up in North America with is share our own learnings and journey, and mutually support each other in that revitalization. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I think I'm hearing is there's some interesting wording that I'm hearing, Helmut, from Chief Francis, because not once have I heard about tribal members. I haven't heard the phrase tribal member. So this is how we talk.
Spotted.
Chief Francis, this is how we talk in Aotearoa. We talk about being a member of a tribe. You haven't used that word at all, or that phrase. And I don't mean to phrase the question in a way that may come across as simple or too simplistic, but how do you refer to yourselves?
So like I said, we're citizens of the Penobscot Nation, first and foremost.
Yeah. Interesting.
And we're citizens because we have a responsibility, like any sovereign nation, when we talk about Indian child welfare and protecting our children, making sure they're not removed. We have a responsibility to our citizens. For example, somebody from Australia can't just take your children from New Zealand. And you have it because New Zealand has a responsibility to its citizens. And so we're citizens of nations, and we're citizens of cultures, and we're not members of some Elks Club somewhere, and we're not a special interest group, and that's the way we feel about it and look at it. And it's these words in the United States, these words matter because it's about changing hearts and minds, and about really getting people in the right frame of mind to understand that this is a political relationship that goes back hundreds of years, and it's one that's rooted in some not so good times, and we all have a responsibility to overcome that. We're saying we're willing to do our part, but you need to focus on giving up some of that control over us. And it's not about geographical locations, and it's not about any of that. It's about the native people here being able to say, these are the institutions that we want in our education, healthcare, economic development, whatever it is. We want to be the decision makers in that space. And you, government, have a responsibility because you've created the condition. And you're making millions and billions of dollars over lost natural resources off the backs of our people for a long time. And you have a responsibility now in a trust fiduciary way to support those initiatives for self-governing of the Maori people.
Wow, Helmut. I mean, that is a powerful and valuable
now you know
insight.
why we love that kōrero.
Yeah. But that alone is such a powerful insight, Helmut.
Yes, it is. Look, in fact, if nobody listens to anything else, the last minute from Chief Francis sums it up. It sums up the ethical basis, the legal, constitutional ethical basis. It sums up the social imperative, the economic imperative, and also provides a framework for coexistence. And this is one thing that it can't be said too many times, that the scaremongering by its framing has been race-based and divisive really only comes from those who for some reason have got an axe to grind. You tell me how our Maori people have ever sent any other signal but that we manaaki our manuhiri, that we look after the people who are in our care and in our domain and space. No, Te Tiriti o Waitangi provides an inclusive frame, and Chief Francis has really shared some insights which he shared today that we're inspiring to all who are in attendance. And I thank him again.
Can I thank you both? First to our manuhiri, Chief Kirk Francis, thank you for your insights, and also thank you for your time. I'm not sure how much more time you've got left in Aotearoa, but I hope that you've enjoyed your stay. I trust that you've been looked after well by the people of Toa rangatira. They are magnanimous hosts. and so I hope that you've received all what we call the manaakitanga that you deserve, and wish you a safe trip home whenever that might occur in the next few days. And to Helmut Modlik, thank you also, Helmut, for your time and speaking to us today with your own insights on the symposium, and indeed the unique relationship that Toa rangatira has had and will continue to have with the Penobscot Nation in Maine in the US. Nō reira, aku rangatira, tēnā kōrua, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Kia ora maira. That was, of course, Chief Kirk Francis, and of course also Helmut Modlik. We have more from Māpuna. Atawiki e tūmainei, thank you for listening in. Thank you for your comments and feedback. Thank you for joining us. E ki ana te kōrero ko te toka ia, ki ha he toka whitianga rā. Ko te toka i Māpuna ko tā au, e ki te ai ko te ripokau. Ti he wa Māori ora, kia tātou katoa.